Hi, everybody. Sorry. Hi, everybody. I'm back again, and I'm experimenting with yet another setup. This one's a little more, yeah, it's hopefully going to work out. Anyway, for those of you who are just tuning in, I am currently reading a manuscript that my dad wrote back in 1982. This is the second version of it. The second remaining version of it. There was an earlier one that was written in 1977. These are the surviving manuscripts. They were all hand typed, and so I'm currently reading this one because it's a different version, and I want to see. I didn't really compare the two manuscripts when I was getting everything ready to print for the first one. So the original one that's out in the wild that you can order is the 1977 version. And the 1982 version, I just wanted to see what the differences were. So I'm going to go into that, and yeah, it is what it is. So for those of you just tuning in, this is your first time listening tonight, you'll want to actually go back and watch past broadcasts. Now, if you're on YouTube, I only have up to chapter 8, I believe, uploaded so far. I'm going to work on trying to get as much of it done as possible. Hopefully by the end of the week, we'll be all caught up so that it's just going straight into videos with sound, and then you'll just be able to like pick it up off the live stream. Yeah, but Twitch, you guys have it. It's a long story. Let's not get in there. Aside from, always check your audio, people. That's my catchphrase, apparently. Anyway, so what I'll be reading tonight is chapter 16 of Guardian of the Sword. Yeah, without further ado, I'm going to hop right in. Okay. Chapter 16. Most who are called wise, and many who would disclaim that title, will admit that the high powers have their reasons for all that comes to pass, though to mortal men the reasons are not readily apparent. The Icarian Pass was blocked and forgotten so thoroughly that Hygerians never became aware of it. It was thus that the men of Asbalon were to come across the mountains and take the Hygerians by surprise. Asbalon eventually came to outshine Hygeria. Then, when Asbalon had grown old and corrupt, Darkon, the prince of the sea-roving Vakons, who had become the captain of the Guardian's warriors, received the sword from the hands of the dying Guardian, who was the last of his line. Supported by the sword, he forged a kingdom from the 4 baronies east of the mountains, which held for 20 years of his reign, to be passed on to his son. And his son was Rourke of the Iron Hand. Aventure, The Kingdom Out of the Ruins by Amerlin. Okay, so I just need to pause really quickly here, because for me, and for anybody else who goes on to read any of the other stories, there will be other stories. It just takes time because I have to scan these and OCR them. Anyway, so as you can tell, like, this little part is a little bit confusing. So you're like, Rourke of the Iron Hand, and wasn't his father not his father wasn't Darkon. No, because this is different a different Rourke who comes later on in the series, much later on. Yeah, it's where the later on the story gets a little bit confusing. There is some jumping around. I still like the story in general. There's just some things that are kind of confusing. There's other things that, as I go on with other stories from from Aventir and Asbalm that you're just kind of like, where do these fit in? So that's for another time. We'll talk about that later. Now on with the story. Among the many things discussed in the following days, in many quarters, was the task that Danel had undertaken. Other than Canal and Rorik, the Old One took into his confidence Donnell, who the only one to know what had happened. They agreed that he had done more than should be expected of a man fighting for a country that's not his. He wished to serve the Guardian, and therefore, over his protests, he was assigned the command of the castle of Aventir. In 2 weeks, the army marched away. The direct route to the pass took them past the haunted forest, and it was there that the rumors among the men grew more intense and inventive regarding the task Danel had undertaken. It was commonly agreed that he had fought the goblins within the forest of Terralala Manara, though the details of the battle varied with the man who told the tale. During the 2 weeks since the taking of Aventir, skirmishing bands had been making life uncomfortable for the Hygerians, who still remained on this side of the mountains. Some even fled through the pass, and the Asbalnians watched the road that let them by unhindered, not wishing to fight against such a desperate men. And the army of Asbaln, as they marched, came upon several pathetic little groups, farmers and herdsmen, carrying what they could on carts and wagons, striving to reach the pass. Worse still were the burned out farmsteads, where men looked and cursed the Hygerian barbarians, until they found that the family that had been massacred there were dark-haired and dark-complexioned, aka the Hygerians. I will say this is not, it's a long story. I'll explain it later. For 2 weeks they attempted the pass, but there was no room for maneuver, and the Hygerians had a stubborn determination which held them to their places. Then, too, they had built a wall of stone across the pass, just behind which they had stocked great numbers of javelins, and behind which they awaited the Asbalnians. At last, retiring from another unsuccessful assault, Rorik heard a young hillman talking to an Asbalnian. I'd almost as lief try the Arcarian Pass. Why not tie bundles of arrows to your arms and legs and flap your way over the mountains, as sensible as going through the mythical passes? No myth. With my own eyes I have seen it, though I'd not want the task of clearing it. Rorik stopped the two and spoke to the Icarian. This is the truth? There is another way through these mountains? The hillman was a handsome young man in a catskin tunic and kilt with a long green feather in his hair. Yes, it is true, my lord guardian, but that is at Lycar's Pass, and may not be used until the hero clears the way. Why has it not been spoken of before? Little use if it had been. By magic it was blocked long ago. And in the olden days, many went in, but none came out. Rorik brought up the subject before Connell a little later. What of the Icarian Pass? Ah, yes, I was shown it during my time in the hills. The entrance is narrow, blocked by a huge mirror, and on it are these words: This way is closed to all until he comes who bears the power to face the dangers beyond. How was it blocked, and by whom? You've heard the name Lycar, the Icarian magician. Lycar of the legends? He who brought forth the mythical dragons? They were no myth. Long ago, after Conall the Wild had united all who spoke the Albanian tongue on the plains, he died more at peace than he lived. His son, Ilach, sometimes called the Rash, sought more glory for Asbaln and sent his hosts into the hills. The hillmen resisted him valiantly, and in the end won a truce and a peace. But during the time of that war, Lycar determined to block the near secret Icarian pass, lest the Albanians discover it and be unable to send an army secretly into the midst of the hills. He was not a good man indeed. Some called him evil, and he drew his spells from places most men would avoid. All one night he worked, in deepest secrecy. They say that one of his spells turned on him and drove him mad, and with the same madness he erected his barrier across the pass. In the morning, the mirror blocked the pass, and dragons occasionally wandered forth from it. Dragons were more fierce and harder to kill than those known to inhabit the mountains. Men found that they might step through the mirror readily, but none ever returned. After some time, men left it alone, left it to slip into legend. Rourke stood up. "It is in my mind to try clearing the pass," he declared. "And it is in my mind that you have lost your senses. None have returned from the pass, and we have need of you here. Consider our situation well, my friend. We might sit here for months and go no further. We might go to the coast and seek out enough ships to ferry our host around the end of the mountains. If we are able to find enough ships whose masters are willing to attempt the task, will the Hygerians not certainly be waiting and watching to find our landing place? And we might march down through the hills, circling north of the mountains. Again, they will surely know that we are coming and be able to march to meet us. And either way, they need only deny us supplies and and perhaps halt us altogether. The inscription on the mirror mentions one who bears the power. We know that the sword has a great deal of power, and it is in my mind that the power is enough. It has power enough for this task. I would liefer go with your blessing. But you would go without it if you must? How could I refuse my blessing when you have given my land for her pride, have given to me the most of my kingdom? But should you not come back again, the sun and stars will be dark in the sky." Concern was written clearly on the prince's face. The next day, before he left, Rourke addressed the warriors. "You know where I go, and you know I may not come back. I ought to be back in 3 weeks. If I have not returned then, you will know that neither sword nor guardian exist, and that you are free of all oaths. I would only ask that you serve your Prince Conall so loyally and truly as you have served me. But if the sword serves me, as it has done, I shall return. So I leave you now, and leave you with all my good wishes, and hope to see you again." He went by horses, and on the second night of his journey, he was awakened shortly after he went to sleep. His hand went to the hilt of his sword, without his willing it, as he saw the dim shape beside his dying fire. It seemed to him that he had been wakened by a burst of light. In the next moment, the shape moved slightly, and light appeared, flowing from the upper end of the staff in his hand. And for all the light, the staff was not consumed. There stood an old man, gray-haired, slight of build, slim-featured, who leaned on his staff. You go to the Icarian Pass, trusting in the power of the sword. Who are you, and how did you learn of this? His questions were ignored. Great things are moving. The flux of events takes a certain course, and when the sword is involved, one who knows what he sees can see much. And you trust in the power of the sword? Why not? It has served me well in some strange circumstance. Has it not served me well in some strange circumstances? Ah, but did it simply use you to do its work? Or did it answer some request of yours? Rourke thought a moment. It seemed to me that when I needed to use the power of the sword, I knew it must be done. What is this to you? Only this. You walk blithely into one of the most complicated traps ever devised by a madman, trusting that you will be protected for having your hand around the hilt of the sword. Oh, a man might survive, indeed, with the power of the sword to guard him, but much will depend on your own wits. If you think that only the sword will protect you, then you will likely survive less time than a man who depended only on his weapon skill. But why is this any concern of yours? Old eyes flashed, and the corners of the mouth upturned only a little. My lord of Aventir, should you die in the forefront of some battle with the Hygerians, even if the sword be taken away as booty to the tent of some Hygerian, it would eventually be recovered, and it would not be hidden from this world. But if you should lose your life within the barrier of the pass, then the sword would be gone from this world, only to be recovered with the greatest of difficulty, if at all. There are dread forces at work in the world, and who knows what dark power might feel free to move if the sword disappears into that barrier. And should it not come out again, then will begin a time of woe for all men. Riddles and mysteries, old man. You look like no Hygerian who might seek to hinder us in our war. Yet you speak of some dread danger that might befall us if I take the sword into the Icarian Pass. Surely you do not think that I will be turned from my path by such strange tales? A flash of humor appeared in those eyes which seemed to hold at the same time the gray of summer rain and a deep sea blue. Ah, my young lord, will it in any way ease your mind to know that many of these dread forces of which I spoke will move also if it should happen that the Hygerians are victorious? I recognize that you have made your choice. I only wish that you will indeed bring the sword forth again. For that reason, you must know that the sword can only protect you if you wish it to. When it acts, the action is in response to your will. Can you tell me what is behind the barrier? Can I tell you whether fall will be early or late this year? Whether snows of winter will be light or so heavy as to keep men to their houses for weeks on end? You go into a trap built by a madman, where what is one moment may not be at the next. It is for you to watch what happens, to judge when the power of the sword is needed, and where it is your weapon skill that is to be tested. So far, I may only warn you. Beware always of that which is not what it seems. So you have come to tell me not to depend on the sword. I've come to tell you that you must not depend on the sword to do your fighting and thinking for you. Use the sword, use your wits, but do not count yourself safe for having an ultimate talisman against the powers of magic. But we have been speaking too long, with too little understanding. I have said what I'm allowed to say, so go on and may it go well with you. May I ask your name? My name. I'm called Amerlin, and I have no doubt that you have heard that name. Farewell, Lord of Aventure. The flame at the end of the staff flared suddenly, blinding Rorik momentarily. When he could see again, the old man was gone. He wondered, as he prepared to sleep, whether he indeed might be the Amerlin of old legends. Amerlin, the wandering wizard, who had taken a leading part in the great war of the legends, and which had come to its end at the Battle of Morana, where men, dwarves, elder folk, and their allies fought against the dread Lord Vandathar. Yet the way he appeared, and the way he had spoken, seemed much like the way Amerlin was described. Surprisingly, sleep came easily to him. When he at last reached Carol Dawn, he stayed there only one night. He told his intentions to the chief and one or two others, sitting in the chief's house around a smoky peat fire. Helena, who served them, heard and said nothing against the plan, though it was plain in her face that she disliked it. The chief and the others tried to argue with him, but his mind was made up. And they knew by now what the guardian was like and when he had made up his mind. Later, he and Helena had a little time alone. Well then, will you also try to dissuade me from this mad project? She smiled and shook her head. No, I know too well that you will not be stopped. May the high ones go with you. Alrighty. So that is the end of the other chapter. It's a little bit longer this time, but it's a better chapter, I think. It's stronger. It's got more stuff going on in it, more legend and lore, more information. So yeah. Um Trying to expound on that. I don't know. I have a lot more that I want to go into about Aventure, but I have so much more research to do as well. There's like based on the papers that he has. I just need to go through them all and organize them and scan them all in. So I'll probably be doing readings from I'll probably do readings from everything. I have to it's a long sorted thing of having to like organize and sort and scan and type everything up. But that's fine. That is what it is. Yeah. So I will talk to you all again tomorrow night and we'll see how big the next chapter is. I don't know. I'm going by sizes of chapters because I have I have a feeling it's probably going to be very similar to the way the other book went, which is fine. It's just like some subtle differences, some changing of focus, I guess. And I think there's a few things that's probably missing, but that the 1977 version had that I'm kind of happy. I'm happy that the 1977 version had. But I'll get when I get to it, or when I don't get to it, and when I don't get to it, and I'm like, oh no, it's not there. I'll explain, and then I might actually read from it because I do have a copy of the. I have a copy of the 1977 book right there, so I might just do some reading from that after, like, just in the end chapters, or I might just read that one later, not back to back, because that's just not too much, but just I'm not going to read all of that. I'm going to go on to other things. Anyway, that is enough of me rambling. Thank you all for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Thank you for liking and subscribing if that's the something. I don't know. Like and subscribe my channel, I guess. Sure, do that. And yeah, I will talk to you all again tomorrow night. Thank you so much.